How about kids, instead of looking to someone else to solve their problem, do something about maybe taking CPR classes?
This past weekend was March for Our Lives, where people all over the US and even in other countries were marching against gun violence and for some common sense gun reforms. Now, following that march, there was an appearance by Rick Santorum on a panel on CNN's State of the Union. And on that panel, he made some really interesting points. So I have two clips to show you, and the second clip gets maybe a little crazier, but here's the first clip.
Is this a political movement? It very well may be, and that's fine. I mean, if the organizers, the people who certainly supported it, the Hollywood elites and the liberal billionaires who funded this, it's all about politics. Is this really all about politics, or is it all about keeping our schools safe? Because it is about keeping our schools safe. Then we have to have much broader discussion than the discussion that's going on right now.
All right, so this first clip here, if you just heard this in passing, you might not think anything of it. But if you actually think about what he just said, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So he is trying to act like this march is either about politics or it's about keeping schools safe. Why can't it be both? Keeping schools safe through pushing politicians to pass common sense gun reforms. Now, the way he's talking about it, he's trying to make it sound like politics is a game. Like, oh, they're just playing politics. But no, this is about an actual issue. This is about actual legislation, trying to push common sense gun reforms through. So you can't say this is just all about politics, because that would mean that this is really just all about making things look good, trying to push the Democrats up. But that's not what this is about. These kids have even specifically called out politicians in general. They haven't just singled out members of the GOP. This is also about Democrats who have support from the NRA. So this is about pushing common sense gun reforms through, which is both, yes, about politics and about keeping schools safe. Now, the other aspect of what he talked about here, the liberal Hollywood elites that funded this. First off, Donald Trump is the president. The only reason anybody knows who Donald Trump is because Donald Trump has used himself, or has used the media to boost himself as this quintessential businessman of America. But Donald Trump, if you look through his history, he is not a good businessman. The good businessmen stay out of the limelight. Trump is attracted to the camera and attracted to attention, and he has used Hollywood to make a name for himself. And the other side of that is, who is the big savior of the conservative party? Ronald Reagan, a former actor. This idea that Democrats use Hollywood and conservatives don't is just not true. Now, I'm totally with you if you think that there are times when Hollywood elites use their platform for not necessarily the right thing. So, for example, Hillary Clinton tried to tap a lot of Hollywood elites to boost her campaign. I thought that was dumb and ineffective. But that doesn't mean that everything a Hollywood elite touches is negative. In this case, they're using their status and their money to try and push common sense gun reforms through, which would benefit the vast majority of citizens in the US. And somebody, just as one example, somebody that was there at the march was Jennifer Hudson, an elite Hollywood singer. But Jennifer Hudson, who performed there, she has a personal experience with gun violence. 3 members of Hudson's family were fatally shot in October 2008. Mother Darnell Donnerson, 57, brother Jason Hudson, 29, and nephew Julian King, 7. A jury found William Balfour guilty of the murders, and a judge sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms. Prosecutors said Balfour, who at the time was married to but separated from Hudson's sister, Julia, had been jealous and angry over his failing marriage. So Jennifer Hudson is a Hollywood elite that was directly impacted by a domestic dispute that ended in gun violence. This is the kind of story that just doesn't happen in other developed countries. Of course, all these other countries, like my country, Canada, we have domestic disputes, but having a harder access to acquire a gun makes it less likely that you will be killed in a domestic dispute. And in fact, the risk of death for abused partners is 5 times greater if guns are present. Now, let's go on to this second clip here where Santorum makes his dumbest point.
How about kids, instead of looking to someone else to solve their problem, do something about maybe taking CPR classes or trying to deal with situations that where there is a violent shooter that you
how
can
are they
actually
looking at other
respond to
people?
that.
I would ask you, they took action.
Yeah, they took action to ask someone to pass a law. They didn't take action to say, how do I, as an individual, deal with this problem? How am I going to do something about stopping bullying within my own community? What am I going to do to actually help respond to a shooter? What am I going to do? Those are the kinds of things where you can take it internally and say, here's how I'm going to deal with this. Here's how I'm going to help the situation, instead of going and protesting and saying, oh, someone else needs to pass a law to protect me.
I've got a kid that's going to be in high school next year, and I want him focused on algebra and other stuff. If his main way to survive high school is learning CPR, so when his friend gets shot, he can keep that. To me, we've gone too far. I'm proud of these kids. I know you're proud of these kids too, because you can do both.
I'm proud of them, but I think everyone should be responsible and deal with the problems that we have to confront in our lives. And ignoring those problems and saying they're not going to come to me and saying some phony gun law is going to solve it. Phony gun laws don't solve these problems. That's what we found out.
I'm really amazed sometimes at just who is allowed on television. This is CNN. This is the most watched news station, channel, whatever. And Rick Santorum is an active contributor. He is on these panels quite often. And why? If you're going to have a conservative on the panel, that's fine. Have somebody who is principled and maybe actually make some points that somewhat make sense. But Rick Santorum is just a never-ending stream of bullshit. So let me break down all the all the points he tried to make here. So the biggest one, obviously, how about taking some CPR classes? Okay. There are multiple layers to how dumb this comment is. First of all, you don't know if these kids don't know CPR. A lot of kids do take CPR classes. So right off the bat, if you care about kids taking CPR classes, chances are a lot of them do know how to do CPR. Now, but regardless of all that, taking CPR classes there's a built-in assumption there that somebody is already shot. That now you have to learn how to tend to people who are shot. Just forget about trying to prevent this issue. Just let's think about how to act when it happens, because it's going to happen. So that's all we should think about. And the other part of that, does CPR really help gunshot wounds? I don't know. I mean, maybe CPR has saved the lives of millions of people who were shot by an assault weapon, but from the damage I've seen, from what assault weapons do, they destroy organs. So I'm not sure how much CPR is going to help a destroyed lung. Now, let's get to some other points here that he attempted to make. Quote, they took action to ask someone to pass a law. Yeah, that's what activism is. And Rick Santorum himself has pushed his followers to take action to pass laws. Here he is tweeting out in 2015, take action. Call your senators now to ask yes on a motion to proceed on HR 240. So, Rick Santorum has pushed people to take action, just as this March is pushing Congress to take action on common sense gun reforms. Now, the other part of that is, he said that, quote,
they didn't take action to say, how do I, as an individual, deal with this problem? How am I going to do something about stopping bullying within my own community? What am I going to do to actually help respond to a shooter? What am I going to do?
How do you know? Did you meet all these kids? All 800,000 people that marched in Washington? You know personally that none of them know CPR? That none of them have organized against bullying? That none of them know how to respond to a shooter? A lot of these things are things that they are already doing in school. They already know how to respond to a shooter. They have lockdown procedures. And most schools now have organized against bullying. These are things that are currently happening. There is only so much we can ask of teenagers. At some point, it's time for the grown-ups in Congress, who I would say are not grown-ups, but it's time for the adults to actually try and do something to help this problem. And that's what this whole march is about. These individuals have taken action. These kids, these survivors of the shooting, have taken action personally to push for this movement and to enact change. And they've gotten a whole generation of kids involved in politics that weren't involved before. Kids are now more aware of how money affects politics. And in this case, how NRA money affects politics. And that interest now in politics is going to continue to grow and grow. And I would say it's very likely that the younger generation, we're going to see a massive uptick in voters in this generation in the midterms, because they are now more politically engaged and are recognizing that they are actually able to change things with their vote. Now, the last part of what Santorum said here, which again, none of what he says makes any sense. Quote, phony gun laws don't solve these problems. What does that mean? Phony gun laws? What's a phony gun law? So this doesn't make any sense. The whole point of this march is to pass gun laws. I'm not sure if you count those gun laws as phony, but they are laws that would help to prevent some mass shootings. Obviously, there is always going to be shootings. You can't prevent every shooting as long as guns exist. But you can definitely limit the amount of shootings that happen, especially mass shootings. So that's the whole point of this march. I don't understand why he's acting like phony gun laws don't solve problems. How do we know that gun laws don't solve problems? They aren't implemented. Once they're implemented, then we can maybe see if there is a downturn in the amount of mass shootings that happen. Now, here's the real reason why Rick Santorum is so pro-gun. 27 people since 1990 have received more than $100,000 from gun rights groups. And Santorum, of course, is on that list with $100,000 or over $115,000 from gun rights groups. So Rick Santorum is bought. He's bought by gun rights groups and the NRA, whose only purpose is to increase revenue for gun manufacturers. This is not a principled discussion on how to limit gun violence. This is a discussion where one guy is purchased by the gun lobby. So that's why we're hearing all this, all of these points that don't make a lot of sense out of Rick Santorum. It's because, yeah, they don't make sense. They're not his points. This isn't a real discussion. He's just a mouthpiece. Now, David Hogg had the absolute best response to Rick Santorum's point. I think Rick Santorum might need to learn CPR for the NRA following the midterms. The thing that I love about these kids is that they cut through all the crap. They are honest about what is actually going on. And in this case, that the NRA is buying politicians, and that being the very reason why there hasn't been some common sense gun reforms. So for the longest time in American media, there has been this dishonest discussion about politics with the Republicans versus the Democrats, when really both of these sides are bought by big money interests. There hasn't been a real discussion about what the citizens, what people actually need to improve their lives. So That's why I hope this movement grows past just gun issues and moves into the issues of big money affecting politics in general and tries to do something about that. Because once you address that, then you begin to elect people to Congress who actually represent you and aren't just bought off by big money. But for now, I love what these kids are doing. This march was incredible, and I really think that there is going to be a massive change in how politics is done. Hey, if you like this video, hit that subscribe button below and consider throwing me a few bucks on Patreon at patreon.com/therationalnational or therationalnational.com/join.